Have you ever had $188, $450 stolen by your own family without a single apology, just a tagged Instagram story that read, "Couldn't have done it without you"? I'm Ava Lin, and 3 nights ago I found out my sister forged my signature, drained my savings, and went on a luxury European tour while I was sipping chamomile tea, thinking I'd finally found peace. The truth no one tells you is this: betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it's the people closest to you who count on your silence. But this time I had spreadsheets, receipts, a lawyer, and this video. I'm going to show you exactly how I froze the accounts, built the case, and reclaimed my life. Not with revenge, but with boundaries. Even if you've always been the nice one, you can still choose yourself. If you've ever suspected someone's been taking more than they give, don't scroll past. Sometimes healing doesn't sound like screaming. It sounds like clicking submit and logging out. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. The chamomile had barely cooled. I held the mug between my hands, fingers curved around the warmth like it was the only thing anchoring me. Outside, the rain tapped a quiet rhythm on the balcony rail. Seattle's usual summer drizzle that never quite stopped, but never quite soaked. Inside, everything was still. Olive, my tabby, snored gently in her favorite corner by the window, her tail curled like a comma. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters. The scent of lemon soap lingered in the air, mingling with the wilted tulips on the table. Leftovers from a farmer's market I wandered through alone last weekend. I liked it that way. Quiet, predictable. 3 days ago, I'd returned from a digital detox retreat just outside Woodinville. No phones, no internet, just long walks, handwritten journaling, and herbal tea that promised healing. For the first time in years, I'd felt like I could breathe again. No calls from Madison, no guilt-laced texts from Mom, no checking my phone 10 times a day waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had promised myself no drama, no distractions. That peace lasted 72 hours, because right then, just as I opened my budgeting binder for Q3, color-coded, labeled, perfectly aligned, my phone lit up with a soft ping. I glanced at it, expecting a grocery app notification. Instead, I saw transaction 188 450s, Lux Travel, and I blinked once, twice, and then I forgot how to breathe. At first, I thought maybe it was a scam, a phishing attempt, a tech glitch. I tapped into my banking app with trembling fingers. Face ID recognized me, no barriers there. And then there it was again. Not pending, not disputed, cleared from my personal savings account. I could see the exact account number, the timestamp, the recipient, everything matched. The transfer memo read, Madison Europe trip. For a moment, I just sat there. The dishwasher hummed in the background. The floor creaked under Olive's shifting weight. My world, the one I had worked so hard to control, wobbled. I scrolled. The charge had been authorized back in March, and according to the bank, it wasn't an error. I called them. A woman answered. Her voice was warm, professional, almost rehearsed. Yes, Ms. Lin. The transfer was pre-authorized on March 12th. We have the paperwork on file. There must be a mistake, I said, voice catching. I never signed anything. Let me forward you the signed authorization form. I refreshed my inbox. The email arrived in seconds. A PDF was attached, stamped with a digital signature. My name at the top. My social security number in the body. My signature, only it wasn't mine. It looked close. Close enough for someone who wasn't me to believe it. But I knew my own handwriting. I knew when something felt off. And everything about this felt off. There was no record of this in my email history. No call logs, no consent. Just a 6-figure transfer rubber stamped with my name. I pushed the tea aside. My stomach had gone hollow. That kind of hollow you get when something breaks. Not a bone, but trust. Across the room, a framed photo of Grandma Eleanor rested on the bookshelf. She wore her usual cardigan, eyes kind behind thick glasses. I could almost hear her voice again, gentle, steady. The hardest betrayals don't come with noise. They come in silence. I opened a new tab on my laptop, searched Lux Travel Int. The website loaded in crisp fonts and shimmering banners. Private jets, yacht rentals, Greek villas with infinity pools, shopping tours in Paris, wine tastings in Tuscany. Madison hadn't gone on a vacation. She had gone on a movie set, all of it draped in champagne and silk. I clicked through the itinerary forwarded in the authorization packet. My name appeared as the primary account holder for all bookings. The rage didn't hit me immediately. It was slower than that, like frost creeping up a window pane. I wasn't even the backup contact. I was the sponsor. And no one had told me. Not Madison. Not Mom. No text. No email. Not even a half-hearted thank you. The only thing they left behind was a balance of $642 in my account. I reached for my phone again. Called Mom. Voicemail. Called again. Still voicemail. I switched to Madison. It rang once, then went silent. Straight to voicemail. I stared at my call log, fingers trembling. I could feel that old heat building at the base of my skull, like the feeling you get when you realize you were the last to know something. Again. I didn't want to call Dad, but I did. He picked up on the first ring. "Ava," he said, no warmth in his voice. "Don't make a scene." "Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless." That was it. Not hello, not what's wrong, not even a fake apology. Just don't make a scene, as if I had imagined the withdrawal, as if I were the one being unreasonable, as if my quiet, careful life could be hijacked and I was supposed to smile and sip my tea. I didn't reply. I didn't hang up either. I just sat there listening to his breath, my own anger cooling into something sharper. This wasn't the first time. But I knew, deep in my bones, that it would be the last time I stayed silent. I wasn't crying. I was budgeting. That was the line I told myself over and over as I sat in my favorite cafe tucked between a flower shop and a used bookstore off Pike Street. Outside the window, tourists weaved through stalls at Pike Place Market, juggling bags of cherries and rain-slick umbrellas. But inside, the world had shrunk to a spreadsheet and a growing knot in my stomach. I stirred the honey into my chamomile tea and watched it swirl, pretending the tremor in my hand was from the caffeine I didn't drink. The screen in front of me glowed with cold precision. Every cell, date, amount, vendor, category, was pristine. I had built this spreadsheet like a fortress, and yet here I was, combing through the rubble. 3 nights ago, my savings account was gutted. That alone would have been enough. But something deeper told me it wasn't the whole story. Not with Madison. Madison once joked, "You track every penny like it's a diary entry." She wasn't wrong. Numbers were the only thing in my life that didn't talk back or rewrite the past. They stayed where I put them, and that's why I saw it. The brokerage account showed a withdrawal in April, $4,300. I paused. Not enormous, but the label was wrong. Ava, tax planning. I hadn't touched that account all year. My accountant, Gary, would have flagged it. I pulled up my taxes. Early filer, always. But there it was, an unfamiliar Form 1099 from a travel credit company I didn't recognize. The reward statement showed flights, bookings, transfers. I scrolled further. A familiar name glared back, Madison Lin, listed as a co-user on my rewards profile, added on February 11th. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. That was the week I was out sick. Bad flu, barely conscious. Madison had come by with soup and a laptop. I remember her saying, "You never use your points. I'm just organizing it for you." I hadn't paid attention, because that's how family gets past you, through moments too ordinary to suspect. I opened our old text thread, the one I hadn't touched in months, scrolled to February. Her message, "You never go anywhere. Might as well let your points breathe." I'd replied with a thumbs up. That was it. Digital consent by emoji. Next, the iCloud calendar. My stomach dropped. Nestled between reminders to renew my lease and pick up Olive's prescription was a shared event. Greece, confirmed. My name tagged, RSVP'd with my initials. I never even saw the invite. The emotional math didn't add up, but the financial math did. Every dollar pointed to a trip. Every photo from Madison's social feed matched a transaction in my ledger. Yacht rentals, spa days, first-class flights. I didn't remember standing, but I found myself pacing the narrow cafe aisle. A barista looked up, concerned. I gave a tight smile and sat down again, pulling my phone close. Then I called Sarah. She answered on the third ring, still in her work blazer, eyes tired. "Hey, stranger, you okay?" "No," I said. And then I flipped the camera and showed her the screen. 5 minutes later, she was in full paralegal mode. "Ava, I'm telling you, this is family fraud. I've seen it. You're not alone. The first thing you need is documentation. Everything." "But it's Madison," I said softly, as if that somehow changed the rules. Sarah didn't roll her eyes, though she could have. She just nodded, especially because it's Madison. She gave me a checklist, statements, screenshots, emails, even social posts. Think like a detective. Build your timeline. By nightfall, I had printed and labeled a manila folder. Q3 Reconciliation Personal. Each page was a betrayal I could touch. There was the yacht bill, $9,100, processed the same day Madison posted about living her goddess era. A booking confirmation for a rooftop villa in Santorini, cross-referenced with an Instagram story. Sunset vibes only, thanks sis. And then the kicker. A high-res photo, Madison posing on the bow of a yacht in Mykonos, glass of champagne in one hand, peace sign in the other. The caption read, "Couldn't have done it without you, Ava Blessed." She tagged me. It wasn't just a digital oversight, it was a declaration. She knew exactly what she was doing. And somewhere in the distance of that photo, past the blue water and the whitewashed cliffs, I could see the edges of a decision forming. I closed the folder. Olive jumped into my lap purring, unaware of the quiet storm building in my chest. Some people grieve out loud, others plot in silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the folder open, flipping through each page like they were pieces of a puzzle someone else had scattered. The lemon soap smell from earlier still lingered, mixed now with the quiet thud of Olive batting a rubber band across the floor. I used to believe that boundaries were rude, that keeping receipts meant holding grudges, but now I understood. It was never about bitterness. It was about truth. People will tell you you're overreacting when they benefit from your silence, and they'll call it family when they want forgiveness without apology. I didn't know what I'd do next. Not yet. But I knew one thing with certainty. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Because if I didn't protect my story, Madison would keep writing hers, with my name, my money, and my silence. And that chapter was ending. The reservation was under Lin, party of 12. I wasn't one of them. The photo appeared mid-scroll, Madison's story, of course, a long table wrapped in soft candlelight, laughter frozen mid-flash. I recognized my mother's blouse, a navy silk I once bought her for her birthday. My father was clinking a glass with someone out of frame. There were roses, wine, silver chargers, and a cake. It read, "Thank you for making this possible." My name wasn't on the post, but the message felt addressed directly to me. I set my phone down on the coffee table. The quiet hum of my apartment seemed louder than usual. The ceiling fan spun lazily above, and Olive was curled on the windowsill, her tail twitching once every few seconds. A cold salad sat in my lap, kale and quinoa left over from lunch. I hadn't even touched it. When I was 8, I gave Madison the bigger slice of birthday cake. She'd looked at me, genuinely surprised, and said, "You're nicer than me." I thought that meant something, that maybe kindness planted roots, that if I gave enough, they'd remember. Apparently not. I picked the phone back up and tapped open my banking app. Transaction, $3,276 $44 restaurant, can lease date, last night. I blinked. My name was on the payment, not on the guest list. There were more pictures. Madison in a velvet wrap dress, holding up a glass of champagne. My aunt laughing beside her. Toasts mid-air. Someone had even made a small printed menu. Scallops with parsnip puree, Wagyu filet, creme brulee. All captioned, "Grateful for nights like these." I clicked on the comments. "So proud of you, Maddie. You earned this. Can't wait to see the full vlog." No one mentioned me. A text popped up. Kevin, former colleague, occasional check-in friend. Kevin, "You okay? I saw Madison's post." I stared at it for a long time, then turned the phone over, screen down. I opened the drawer in my side table. Inside was a letter I hadn't read in months. Eleanor's last handwritten note, dated 2 weeks before she passed. She'd written in blue ink, her cursive slightly shaky near the end. "Some people take from the well until it runs dry. Others build their own. Always be the builder." I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen lit the room in a sterile glow. I clicked through folders until I found it. Accounts. Freeze status. .xlsx color-coded tabs. Password logs. Transaction trails. My fingers hovered over the Submit Request button from my bank's security team. I drafted it weeks ago but never followed through. There was always a reason to wait. A birthday, a holiday, a hope. Tonight, there wasn't. I clicked. The email confirmation came instantly. Freeze request confirmed. Action initiated. I didn't feel power. I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. Like something had unclenched in my chest. I knew boundaries wouldn't fix everything overnight. Madison would rage. Maybe cry, maybe post something vague and passive-aggressive. Mom would call. Dad would pretend not to know what I was talking about. But that was noise. And I was finally tuning it out. I opened a new tab, searched fraudulent family transactions, legal options. It felt surreal typing the words, but they were true. Numbers don't lie. But family, well, that was another story. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and exhaled. Tomorrow, I'd start listing every asset tied to my name, every password changed, every account secured. Tonight, I'd let the silence settle, not as surrender, but as space. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from finally, quietly, refusing to be used. They expected a meltdown. I gave them a spreadsheet. Sunday afternoon light angled through the blinds, casting narrow bands across the wooden dining table I'd inherited from Grandma Eleanor. I hadn't touched my tea. It sat cooling beside a yellow legal pad and my laptop, which displayed 3 squares waiting for a 4th. I clicked Join. My parents' faces appeared first. Douglas in his navy sweater, stiff-backed as ever. Denise had her hair curled like she was going to church. Then Madison joined, eyes already mid-roll like she had something better to do. "Hi, sweetheart," my mom said, her voice laced with brittle warmth. "Your hair looks nice." I nodded. "Let's get to it." My father cleared his throat. "Ava, we don't want this to spiral. It's a family matter. Let's resolve it quietly." Funny, I thought. Privacy only matters when they're the ones stealing. Madison cut in. "Look, I didn't know it would be this big a deal. I thought it was, like, a gift. You weren't using the money. I figured you'd understand." I said nothing, just shared my screen. 4 folders appeared. Evidence, bank signatures, social tags, timeline. "Let's walk through this together," I said, calm as a spreadsheet. Click. First slide, withdrawal receipts with timestamps. Then a bank authorization form, my name, forged signature. Next, screenshots from Madison's Instagram, Greece, Paris, Mykonos, same dates, same funds. Mom's mouth parted slightly. "Madison has a child, Ava. She's doing her best." I looked directly at the screen. "So did Grandma. You still took from her, too." Silence. Not even Madison's virtual background moved. My father leaned forward. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just money. You're acting ungrateful." My hand stayed still on the table. "I'm not angry. I'm done being useful." That's when I pulled up the last document, a scanned letterhead from the law office I'd contacted. "I've spoken to my attorney," I said. "You'll receive a formal notice this week." Madison's camera glitched. Denise wiped her eyes. Douglas opened his mouth. Then I clicked, "Leave meeting." The silence was immediate. My chest didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. "Kevin, you okay?" "Me? No, but I'm finally in control." It hadn't always been like this. There were years, brief, flickering ones, where I believed we were the kind of family who kept one another safe. I remembered brushing flour off the kitchen counter as Grandma Eleanor baked cookies for school fundraisers. Back then, family meant warm aprons and whispered secrets after bedtime, not cold PDFs and mismatched bank transfers. But Grandma died, and in the absence of her quiet morality, the balance shifted, slowly, subtly, until giving became expected and asking was considered selfish. Madison had always been the golden one, spirited, unapologetically messy. She could crash a car and somehow make Dad laugh about the insurance claim. Meanwhile, I memorized deadlines and stacked coasters beneath every glass. At first, I thought they just didn't notice how much I carried. Later, I realized they did notice. They simply didn't care. After the Zoom call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle. The wooden table was scarred in places, rings from hot mugs, a nick from where I'd dropped scissors as a kid. Real things, earned things. I opened the freezer, pulled out a tray of lemon bars I'd made from Eleanor's old recipe, and let one thaw beside my tea. The taste was just as I remembered, sweet, tart, unapologetic, just like she'd taught me to be. I texted Sarah a quick update. "Zoom's done. Legal process starting." She replied with a thumbs up and a heart, simple, steady. She never asked why I was doing this. She just reminded me it was okay to stop giving. Kevin texted again, "Proud of you, seriously." I didn't reply right away. I let the glow of his words sit beside me for a moment. Then I opened my inbox and began organizing the next steps. POA revocations, updated passwords, notarized letters. It was tedious. It was healing. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it because sometimes peace requires paperwork, because sometimes love must come with boundaries, even if those boundaries come too late. They thought I'd scream, cry, apologize. Instead, I drafted a cover letter and signed it with clean hands and a steady name. Mine. That evening, I sat by the window as the city wound down around me. The sun dipped behind the Olympic Mountains, casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood streets. Olive, my tabby, curled at my feet as if sensing something had shifted, like a thread had been pulled from a too-tight sweater, finally letting air in. I reached for Grandma's journal, the one she'd left me tucked inside a knitting basket with a note. "When silence gets too loud, write." On the last page, I scribbled, "They wanted quiet." I gave them silence with signatures. There were no fireworks, no final showdown, only a screen gone dark and a woman reclaiming her name, and somehow that was louder than anything I could have screamed. I stood in the kitchen, letting the hum of the refrigerator fill the space where their voices had once lived. I wasn't celebrating, but I wasn't retreating either. It's a strange thing, losing a family while gaining yourself. I didn't know what tomorrow held, but tonight, for the first time in a long time, I chose me, and that was enough. The key was wrapped in faded floral ribbon. I hadn't seen that pattern since I was 10, blue cornflowers and soft lilacs on yellow fabric, frayed at the edges. Grandma Eleanor used to tie it in her hair when she gardened. She'd say it was her lucky charm for getting hydrangeas to bloom early. Now, it was tied around a tarnished bronze key, tucked in a manila envelope with my name in her looping cursive. Ava. Nothing more. I stood outside the cottage in Carmel by the Sea, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The shingles were weather-worn, the window boxes overgrown, but the wind smelled like lavender and salt, just like I remembered. I hadn't come here in years, not since the family beach trips where Madison would complain about sand in her shoes while I helped Eleanor hang wind chimes. It was the one place I had never been invisible. Inside, the air was cool and still. I closed the door behind me, and for a moment it felt like the house exhaled, a familiar creak of the floor, the kitchen with its pale blue tile, the ceramic cookie jar shaped like a pelican, everything untouched, like Eleanor had stepped out for groceries and would be back any minute. On the kitchen table was a box labeled in fading black ink. For Ava, only if she comes. My hands shook. Inside was a photograph. Me at age 7, holding a tiny trowel while Eleanor crouched behind me, smiling through her garden hat. Her note was tucked behind the frame. Ava, I always knew you'd come back. Not to visit, but to return to yourself. This house is yours, not because of blood, but because of choice. You chose kindness when they chose convenience. You chose honesty when they lied. I saw you. I sat on the tile floor, holding the letter like it was a heartbeat. In the kitchen drawer, beneath a stack of rubber bands and coupons, I found a folded piece of paper, a child's drawing, stick figures on a beach, Auntie Ava and Mama standing under the sun. Sophie's name was in the corner, surrounded by pink hearts. I pinned it to the fridge with an old magnet that read, "Grow where you're planted." I didn't cry. I just breathed. I wandered down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the same faded runner that had been there since I was a child. Every painting on the wall was exactly where it had been. Shell sketches, watercolor sunsets, a photo of me with a missing front tooth standing proudly beside a sandcastle taller than I was. The guest room smelled faintly of cedar and something sweeter. Eleanor's old perfume, maybe, or just time folding in on itself. I opened the closet and found more of her handwritten labels. Holiday lights, tangled. Gift wrap, too pretty to toss. And then one box, taped twice over, labeled simply, Legacy. Inside wasn't treasure, but it felt like gold. Old family recipe cards in her script, a VHS tape labeled 4th of July, 1998, and a notebook with clippings of articles about women entrepreneurs, each page highlighted and marked with hearts. She had circled one quote, "When they say you're too much, go louder." I touched that page like it might dissolve under my fingers. Back in the kitchen, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the open window. The breeze carried in the briny air and the faint squawk of seagulls. Olive would have loved it here, I thought, and then caught myself smiling for the first time in days. The past few months had stripped everything down. I had nothing left of the illusion. But here, with Eleanor's voice in my hands and the keys to something she once protected fiercely, I had something better, a beginning. Even in absence, she had made space for me to remember who I was before I started shrinking to fit the version others wanted. Not loud, not angry, just honest, unapologetically so. Later, while walking the backyard garden, now wild with rosemary and forgotten roses, I spotted something wedged beneath the bird bath. Another envelope. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Madison. Inside, one sheet of paper. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you use this house better than we used your trust. M. No apology, no excuses. Just the truth. Simple, unvarnished, for once. That night I sat on the porch swing Eleanor built, the ocean humming in the distance. I read her letter aloud, quietly like a prayer. "You were never too much," it said. "You were just too honest for us." The words landed like balm over years of invisible bruises. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was just free. I opened my laptop. The porch light flickered on, moths dancing in the glow. New document. Title: The Eleanor Fund for Women Rebuilding After Family Betrayal. I didn't have a perfect plan yet, just a seed, But that was how Grandma started her garden. One packet of seeds, one patch of dirt, one hope that things would grow where they were finally cared for. I'd always thought legacies were made of money, of property. But Eleanor was right. Legacies aren't built. They're protected. And this one, this strange, sweet, hard-earned one, was mine. I stepped outside again before dusk, barefoot, feeling the cracked stones under my feet. This place didn't just remember me, it welcomed me back. The next morning, I opened every window in the house. Let the light in. Let the past out. Let something new begin. The bookstore smelled like cedar and new beginnings. Tucked between a pottery cafe and a vegan bakery on Capitol Hill, it didn't look like much from the outside, but stepping through the doors felt like walking into warmth itself. The shelves were lined with hand-picked titles, memoirs, cookbooks, poetry by women who had rebuilt their lives one broken piece at a time. The Eleanor Fund launch banner hung gently above the small podium. Someone had tucked fresh marigolds into the corners. I adjusted the sleeves of my navy sweater, took a sip of tea gone lukewarm, and stared at the dozen folding chairs arranged in hopeful symmetry. Some were already filled, by friends, by quiet strangers, by people who looked like they'd come here straight from a day of carrying burdens no one else saw. Sarah caught my eye from the back, giving me a thumbs up as she finished arranging books near the donation table. Kevin slipped in just as I stepped up to the mic, carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper with string. I couldn't see what was inside, but the corners had been carefully folded, the kind of detail only someone who knows you pays attention to. I exhaled. "Hi, I'm Ava Lin," I began, clearing my throat. And I used to think healing meant getting everything back the way it was before. A stillness settled over the room, respectful, not expectant. But now I know, I continued, that healing is deciding what you'll never let happen again. I told them about the quiet parts, how it wasn't one betrayal, but 100 paper cuts I kept bandaging, how some of the hardest decisions in life aren't loud. They're made in silence, with no one clapping when you choose dignity over revenge. They didn't break me, I said. They just showed me where to begin. There was no dramatic reading, no tears, just steady words and a stillness that grew warmer with each sentence. When I finished, the applause came gently, more like an exhale than a cheer. Sarah joined me on stage for a Q&A. She passed me a bottle of water and smiled. One woman asked how I knew it was time to walk away. "When silence feels stronger than shouting," I said softly, "and peace costs less than proof." A few people lingered after. A man with silver hair pressed a small envelope into my hand. "For the fund," he whispered. A young woman hugged me tightly and left without saying a word. Then the woman with the salt and pepper hair approached. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but recognition. "That's my story, too. Different details. Same ache." I took her hand. We stood like that for a moment, no explanations needed. As the evening wound down, Kevin handed me the brown paper bundle. Inside was a pencil sketch of the house in Carmel by the sea, the porch with its peeling paint, the little fence I had already begun fixing, even the pelican jar in the window Eleanor used for lavender cookies. I blinked against the sting in my eyes. "You remembered the jar," I said. Kevin just nodded. My phone buzzed. Madison. Her name lit up the screen like a ghost. I let it ring. Once, twice. I stared at the name like it belonged to someone else's life. Then I hit mute. I didn't need to answer. Some conversations aren't bridges, they're traps. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside. Autumn had fully arrived, leaves rustling like applause from the trees, wind carrying the scent of pine, paper, and maybe possibility. I walked the familiar stretch toward Volunteer Park, letting the cold brush my cheeks and clear my thoughts. I sat under the oak tree Eleanor used to love. She once made up stories about chipmunks hosting tea parties in its hollow, her laugh bright and full. I could still hear it, tucked somewhere in the marrow of my memory. In my pocket was a notebook. Ivory cover, no title. I opened to the first page. I hesitated just a second, then wrote 3 words. Start from here. That was it. No dramatic finish. No final word sent, no revenge orchestrated. Just peace. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I walked away, with everything that mattered still mine. And that was enough. Later that night, I lit a candle on the windowsill of my apartment, one Eleanor had once gifted me with a note. For moments that need quiet light. I watched the flame flicker, not for her memory, but for mine, for the version of me that stayed, that endured, that finally chose to speak and to stop apologizing for doing so. That night, I placed the candle on my windowsill, the one Grandma Eleanor once called a light for moments that need quiet. In its soft flicker, I didn't just see her. I saw myself, choosing peace over resentment, clarity over chaos. In life, not every wound needs revenge. Sometimes healing begins the moment we stop bleeding for people who never tried to stop the cut. When family fails to offer kindness, we still have the right to walk away and rebuild, on our own terms, with our own strength. If this story reminded you of something you've lived through, feel free to share a few words, because sometimes what you've quietly endured might be the light someone else needs to begin again.